The night before my wedding, I saw my late grandmother in my dream. She had been gone for 3 years. 3 long years during which I missed her every single day. She was the only person who truly understood me, who could read my silence better than anyone else could understand my words. When she passed away, it felt like the ground beneath my feet had cracked open. And yet, there she was. In the dream, I was standing in her old kitchen. The curtains were gently moving as if touched by a soft summer breeze. The smell of her apple pie filled the air. She stood by the wooden table, wearing her faded blue dress, the one she always wore on Sundays. She looked exactly as I remembered her, calm, warm, but this time, worried. "Don't rush into this marriage," she said softly. Her voice wasn't frightening, it was steady, serious. "Look carefully at the house you're entering." I tried to ask her what she meant, but the room began to fade. Her face blurred. Just before everything disappeared, she added, "Not everyone who smiles at you wishes you happiness." I woke up breathless. My heart was racing, and my pillow was damp with tears. For a few minutes, I just stared at the ceiling, trying to calm myself down. It was only a dream, I told myself. People say when you're stressed, your subconscious creates strange visions. And what could be more stressful than a wedding? I was marrying Daniel the next day. Daniel was kind, successful, attentive, at least that's how everyone described him. He owned a small but growing construction company. He had a charming smile and a confident way of speaking that made people trust him instantly. My friends envied me. My coworkers said I was lucky. But if I'm being honest, something had always felt slightly off. Not with him exactly, with his mother. From the first time I visited her house, I felt like I was being examined. Judged, measured. She smiled, constantly, but her eyes remained cold. She made little comments disguised as jokes. "Oh, you don't cook much. That's all right. Daniel always loved simple food. You work long hours. Well, I suppose someone has to, though in our family we value home more." Each sentence was gentle, polite, yet sharp enough to leave tiny invisible cuts. I brushed it off. No one has a perfect mother-in-law, I told myself. Maybe I was just being sensitive. But after the dream, something shifted inside me. Look carefully at the house you're entering. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for late afternoon. In the morning, I decided to drive to Daniel's mother's house. I told him I wanted to drop off a box of decorations we had left there earlier. He didn't suspect anything. When I arrived, the house seemed unusually quiet. It was a large 2-story home in a respectable neighborhood. White walls, manicured lawn, tall windows. Perfect from the outside. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knew she was home. Her car was in the driveway. I tried the door handle. It was unlocked. I hesitated. For a moment, I considered turning back. But then my grandmother's voice echoed in my mind. "Look carefully." I stepped inside. The living room was immaculate as always. Every cushion perfectly placed. Not a single speck of dust. But something felt tense in the air, like a room that had just hosted an argument. I heard voices from down the hallway. I froze. Daniel's voice. And his mother's. "You have to do it before the wedding," she was saying firmly. "I will," Daniel replied, sounding irritated. "Stop repeating it. It's not just about you," she continued. "If you marry her without protecting your assets, you're a fool. I didn't raise you to give everything to some girl from nowhere." Some girl from nowhere. My chest tightened. "She doesn't need to know about the transfer," his mother added. "Once the company and the house are officially in my name, she'll have nothing to claim." Silence. Then Daniel sighed. "It's temporary." "Of course it is," she said smoothly. "Until we see if she's truly suitable." Suitable. As if I were applying for a job. My vision blurred. I stepped back quietly, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. I couldn't breathe. I felt foolish, humiliated, angry. So that was it. He hadn't told me about any transfer. We had talked about finances before the wedding. He assured me everything would be shared, transparent, equal. And yet, the day before marrying me, he was transferring his company and property into his mother's name. Not because he didn't trust marriage. Because he didn't trust me. I left the house without making a sound. When I got into my car, I finally allowed myself to cry. But the tears didn't last long. Something stronger rose inside me. Clarity. That evening, I walked down the aisle in my white dress. The guests smiled. Music played softly. Daniel stood at the altar, confident and composed. When I reached him, I looked into his eyes and searched for guilt. I found none, only expectation. The officiant began the ceremony. We exchanged vows. When it was my turn to say, "I do," I paused. The silence stretched. People shifted in their seats. Daniel squeezed my hand slightly, encouraging me. I took a deep breath. "I had a dream last night," I said, my voice steady. A few guests chuckled nervously. My grandmother came to me. She told me to look carefully at the house I was entering. Daniel's expression changed, just slightly. And this morning, I did. The room went completely silent. I heard something I wasn't meant to hear. About transferring property. About protecting assets. About making sure I would have nothing. Daniel's face went pale. His mother stood up abruptly. "This is inappropriate." "No," I interrupted calmly. "What's inappropriate is planning financial deception before a marriage built on trust." Murmurs filled the room. Daniel tried to speak. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it," I said gently. "Explain why everything was transferred into your mother's name yesterday." He opened his mouth, closed it. No explanation came. I felt strangely peaceful. "I cannot marry someone who begins our life together with secrecy and doubt," I continued. "Marriage is not a business deal. It's not a test of suitability." I removed the ring from my finger and placed it in his palm. Gasps echoed around us. I deserve to enter a house where I am welcomed, not evaluated. I turned and walked down the aisle alone. Outside, the evening air felt cool against my skin. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold. My hands trembled, but my heart felt lighter than it had in months. Later that night, as I sat in my small apartment surrounded by unopened wedding gifts, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "We can fix this. It was just a precaution. You embarrassed me." I stared at the screen. Embarrassed him, not hurt me, not betrayed my trust. Embarrassed him. I didn't reply. Instead, I looked at the framed photo of my grandmother on my shelf. For the first time since she passed, I felt her presence not as grief, but as guidance. Sometimes love isn't about staying. Sometimes it's about walking away before the door closes behind you. Weeks passed. I returned the dress, refunded what I could, faced the whispers and the questions. Some people said I overreacted. Others said I was brave. But slowly, a new life began to take shape. One built not on appearances, but on self-respect. Months later, I learned through mutual acquaintances that Daniel's company was struggling. The temporary transfer had created legal complications. Investors grew cautious. Tensions at home increased. I felt no satisfaction, only certainty. I had almost stepped into a house where I would forever be proving my worth. Instead, I chose myself. And sometimes, that is the bravest wedding vow of all. If you've ever ignored a red flag because you were afraid to start over, remember this: intuition is not your enemy. It is the quiet voice that loves you when others do not. And sometimes, it speaks in dreams. After I walked away from the altar, the silence that followed me felt louder than the music that had filled the hall just minutes earlier. I remember sitting in my car outside the venue, my wedding bouquet still in my hands, staring at the steering wheel as if it might tell me where to go next. My phone kept buzzing. Calls from Daniel, messages from friends, one text from his mother: "You will regret humiliating our family." I turned the phone off. For the first time in a long time, I needed quiet more than explanations. That night, I didn't go home immediately. I drove to the cemetery. I hadn't planned it. My hands simply turned the wheel on their own. The air was cool, and the sky above was dark and endless. I stood in front of my grandmother's grave, still wearing my wedding dress, the fabric brushing against the grass. I listened, I whispered. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but they weren't the same desperate tears from earlier. These felt cleansing, honest. For a few minutes, I allowed myself to grieve, not just the wedding, but the future I had imagined. The shared breakfasts, the vacations, the children, the version of love I thought I was stepping into. When I finally returned to my apartment, exhaustion hit me all at once. I took off the dress slowly, carefully folding it even though I knew I would return it the next day. Looking at myself in the mirror without the white fabric felt strange. Bare, but also real. The next morning, reality arrived with sunlight. My phone, once turned back on, exploded with notifications. Some friends wrote, "Are you okay?" Others wrote, "What happened?" One message stood out, from Daniel. "You misunderstood everything. We were only protecting what I built before you. Any smart person would do the same." I read it twice. Not once did he say he was sorry. Not once did he say he regretted hurting me. He regretted being exposed. I typed a simple reply. Trust does not need protection from honesty. Then I blocked his number. The following week was brutal. People love drama, especially when it unfolds in wedding dresses. At work, whispers followed me into the break room. A colleague tried to be supportive but couldn't hide her curiosity. Was it really about money? She asked gently. It was about trust, I answered. But even as I said it, I realized it was deeper than that. It was about respect, about partnership, about not being treated like a potential threat. A few days later, Daniel showed up at my apartment unannounced. I almost didn't open the door, but part of me wanted closure. He looked different, less polished, more tired. His confidence had cracks in it now. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside, letting him in. He walked around the apartment as if it were already a memory. You made a scene, he began. You could have talked to me privately. I tried to talk to you about finances before, I replied calmly. You said everything would be shared. Transparent. It would have been. He insisted. The transfer was just temporary. My mother worries. You know how she is. Yes, I said. I do know how she is. He ran his hand through his hair. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The company is growing. There are risks. Marriage complicates things legally. So instead of discussing those risks with me, I said, you chose secrecy. He hesitated. I didn't think it was a big deal. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Not a big deal. My security, my position in the marriage, my dignity. I looked at him carefully, searching for the man I thought I loved. Do you trust me? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. I trust you, he said slowly, but I believe in being cautious. There it was. Caution, in his mind, meant preparing for the possibility that I would one day take what he had built. He had already imagined our divorce before our wedding. I can't build a life with someone who sees me as a future enemy, I said softly. His jaw tightened. So that's it. You throw everything away. I didn't throw it away, I replied. You did when you decided I wasn't worthy of honesty. He left without saying goodbye. That night, I expected to feel devastated. Instead, I felt steady. Weeks turned into months. Life reorganized itself slowly. I poured my energy into work. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during wedding planning. I began taking evening walks, something I hadn't done in years. One evening, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old notebook of my grandmother's. I had kept it after she passed but never opened it fully. Inside were recipes, shopping lists, and small handwritten reflections. One sentence caught my attention. Never enter a home where you must shrink to be accepted. I sat on the floor for a long time after reading that. Had I been shrinking? Yes. I remembered the small adjustments I had made. Laughing less loudly because his mother found it unrefined. Changing my clothes before visiting their house. Apologizing when I hadn't done anything wrong. Convincing myself that discomfort was normal. It wasn't. Around 3 months after the cancelled wedding, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Daniel's business was facing difficulties. Investors had become wary after sudden ownership changes. Legal paperwork needed restructuring. There were internal disagreements. Apparently, transferring everything to his mother's name had complicated more than it solved. For a brief moment, I felt vindicated. But it passed quickly. I didn't want his failure. I wanted partnership. One afternoon, I ran into him unexpectedly at a cafe. We both froze. He looked older somehow. The sharp confidence had softened into something more uncertain. Hi, he said. Hi. We stood awkwardly before deciding to sit. How have you been? He asked. Good, I replied honestly. Peaceful. He nodded slowly. I've been thinking, he said after a pause. Maybe I let my mother influence me too much. Maybe. Not definitely. Marriage would have meant choosing, I said gently. You would have had to choose transparency over control. As over fear. He looked down at his coffee. I wasn't ready, he admitted quietly. For the first time, I saw truth in his eyes. Not manipulation, not pride, just realization. I hope you find someone you're ready for, I said sincerely. In you? He asked. I already found myself, I replied. We parted ways without anger. Without drama. Just two people who almost built something, but not on the same foundation. As the months continued, something unexpected happened. I began to trust my instincts more. At work, when a new project felt wrong, I spoke up. When a friend asked for advice about her relationship and described small controlling behaviors, I didn't minimize them. I had learned that red flags rarely appear all at once. They whisper. They disguise themselves as jokes. As precautions. That's just how I am. 1 year after the cancelled wedding, I visited my grandmother's grave again. This time, I wore a simple blue dress. I understand now, I said softly. You weren't warning me about a house. You were warning me about a life. The wind moved gently through the trees, and for the first time, I didn't need a dream to guide me. I had learned to listen while awake. Looking back, I don't see the wedding day as a failure. I see it as the moment I chose self-respect over illusion. Love without trust is negotiation. Marriage without transparency is performance. And a home without acceptance is just a building. If you are standing at the edge of a decision, ignoring the quiet discomfort in your chest because everything looks perfect on the outside, pause. Look carefully at the house you're entering. Not the walls, not the decorations, but the intentions inside it. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can say at the altar is not, I do. It's, I deserve better. And sometimes, the voice that saves you sounds like a memory.